All right, on today's podcast, sit down with Eric Cooper. He is a good friend of mine. Met him a couple of years ago at Huntstock. You guys might have seen him around Huntstock and all of his ball of energy he brings everywhere he goes. He's a business strategist, and he got into hunting just a couple of years ago. He got in as an adult, and he just loves it. Deer hunting, bear hunting. He's bitten by the bug. We talk about how he got into hunting, why he got into hunting, his unique circumstances around that, what he's looking forward to. We do talk a little bit about business and business strategy, and then we get into some tactics at the end of the podcast. He asked me a couple questions about Onyx and some other things, and just an overall great conversation. Hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get into it now. Here he is, Eric Cooper. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Hunt Suburbia podcast, joined by my friend Eric Cooper. Thanks for coming, Eric. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Hunt Suburbia. That's a big time one to be on. So happy to be here.
Oh, you're being nice, man. Yeah, Eric. I met Eric through Huntstock. I just saw him at Huntstock. Was it just last year or was it 2 years ago? Have you been going every year?
I came second year was the first year that I came to Huntstock.
Yep. Yeah. But we connected last year on Saturday. And we started talking, and we talked about church a little bit. And you know, you're involved in the church, and your dad is heavily, and you were raised that way. And I was like, man, it's been a dream of mine at Huntstock for years. I just haven't gotten to it on the list yet to have somebody, a church service on Sunday, and have somebody talk. And you're like, I can line that up for tomorrow. and your dad came and talked, and he delivers the word on Sunday morning, and it's awesome. And he did it again this year, and it's just so funny how things happen that way.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we were in front of the barn there, and we just met each other. I mean, we'd met each other earlier, but it was in passing, and we were just getting to know each other. And I mentioned the church thing, and yeah, I made one call to my dad, and he was all about it. He's the pocket preacher. He was ready to go.
Oh, yeah. So if you guys, some of you probably sat in on the service on Sunday, but we're doing that every year now on Sunday morning, and I encourage you to come and check that out. It's a pretty special experience. So Eric got into hunting. He's got a unique story. We're going to go through how he got into hunting as an adult, kind of what it means to him and stuff like that. But why don't you just let people know a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah, probably. I grew up most of my life in New Hampshire. I was born in Massachusetts. My dad is from Brooklyn, inner city Brooklyn, New York, and my mom is from Belize. So they met in college because my mom immigrated when she was about 14 and ended up in New York, and they ended up going to the same school. So my dad neither grew up with any type of outdoors or hunting anything, right, at all. My dad was playing basketball in the inner city ghettos of Brooklyn, which is cool. He got to play with some pretty cool people that, some names that some folks would recognize,
like
basketball-wise today. Well, he used to ride the bus with Mark Jackson, third overall.
No way.
Third all-time in assists in the NBA, and so he would play with him, and, some other guys that ended up playing in Europe. Wendell Alexis is a guy that he used to play with. And
cool.
So, yeah, he loves basketball, and so it's not, he didn't know this guy because of the age difference, but he came from like the same part of Brooklyn that Lamar Odom grew up playing in, and where he got discovered. So there's been a lot of basketball guys to come out of there. And my dad, I don't even know if he'd ever left New York, maybe once to New Jersey or Connecticut or something by the time he graduated college. So his first job offer was in Massachusetts, and that's how our family ended up out here. He and my mom moved out here, had never been to Massachusetts before, and so I grew up in Lowell for the first 8 years of my life and then moved to New Hampshire.
Awesome. And you were just telling me your mom's from Belize.
Belize.
And what's the crazy family tie? And trust me, we're going to get, there's too many great stories to pass up in the beginning. We're going to get into a lot of hunting talk, but tell me about your mom's family in Belize.
My mom's family in Belize. So, yeah, and I've never been back to Belize, but I've always wanted to go and see where my mom grew up, and it's very different than when she grew up. But I think it was in 2019, my brother was online, and he was looking at the profile of Shine the rapper on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
And some of you may remember Shine.
He's been in the headlines since the whole Diddy trials recently.
Right.
Yeah.
So that whole thing came back because he was hanging out with Diddy and Jennifer Lopez in the late 90s. Well, what does it have to do with, what? This seems like not related at all. So when looking at Shine's page, my brother recognized it said that Shine's father was Dean Barrow, the president of Belize. And my grandmother's maiden name is Barrow. And Belize is only like, I don't know, 180,000, 200,000 people last I checked. So my brother's like, wait a minute. And he starts putting two and two together. He starts digging a little bit. So anyway, he brought it up to a couple people in the family. We're like, what are the chances, right? And then he goes and asks my grandfather, and we're like, did you know, are we related to this guy? And he's like, oh yeah, I grew up with Dean. He was my lawyer when I was, in my 20s and whatever. Now, this is 2000, I believe, 19, so
yeah.
President Barrow had already announced he wasn't running for re-election. And we found this out in like 2019. And we're like, how have we never had this conversation before? Like, we could have gotten a trip out of this or something, or gone back to see the place. I mean, I've never talked to Shine. I've never talked to President Barrow. They don't know me from a hole in the wall. Yeah. But I think he's like my fourth cousin or something like that. So it's not super close, but it's one of those things, right? A lot of cultures, the whole extended family, they all grow up around each other, everybody's uncle or cousin, right? Even, regardless of what the actual family relation is. And it was one of those scenarios with my grandfather and the Barrows.
Yeah, and in a lot of cultures too. I mean, my wife's from Kyrgyzstan. She's Russian descent. The grandparents live, or your parents live with you for a lot of the time, and you take care of them in their older years. It's something with the United States where that kind of doesn't exist. If you grew up in the U.S. and, that just doesn't seem to exist. It's like your parents get older, they live on their own, and then maybe they go into a nursing home. But I love that about other cultures where you take care of your parents. They move in with you. You're happy about doing that, and they help so much with the kids and everything.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's something to the familial aspect of some other cultures. And American individualism has its pros too, right? So there's usually
That's what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And just different. So it's just one of those things, right? So, when the family moved from Belize, and a lot of the family ended up coming over, whether it was to New York or Miami or LA or whatever, the big cities that people typically immigrate to, a lot of that connection was lost, I guess you could say. But yeah, we talked to him about it, and he knew exactly what we were talking about. He was telling us stories about when he was younger. And I've always wanted to go to Belize to go to the jaguar sanctuaries, just to get eyes on one of those things.
That'd be cool.
Like, those are like my favorite big cat. I love jaguars.
Yeah.
They're ghosts.
Yeah.
So even if I went, chances are I wouldn't see one, but I've always wanted to go to Belize and see one.
That would be awesome.
Triangle or whatever.
Yeah. All right, so how did you get this hunting bug? Like, what's your story about getting into hunting?
Well, the hunting bug, and hopefully this is helpful even maybe for some people out there. It started totally different for me. So there was no background of hunting in my family. There was no equipment or knowledge that got handed down. I didn't have friends that did it, anything like that. But that story about my mom being from Belize is, interestingly enough, kind of how it started. How it started was from a culinary perspective. So I've been cooking since I was like 8 or 9 years old. But the way that started out was, the food my mom made was different than the food that everybody else here made. So I started to go into the spice cabinet with a teaspoon and just be trying all sorts of different spices that, just to get the profile of that spice in and of itself.
Yeah.
And in my head, almost like a mixologist, figure out, okay, this would go with this or whatever, and start understanding really flavor palettes. Well, that developed over the next couple years to me trying cooking on more things and cooking with, chicken and beef and whatever. And through that and a combination of just an interest in history, it's like, well, why don't we only eat like pork and beef and chicken like all these other cultures eat this other stuff? So then, I got my first job and I started like buying, there's this store, I don't even know if it's open anymore, New Hampshire, called the Healthy Buffalo, and they sold all sorts of exotic meats, and so I got kangaroo and I got camel, and I was experimenting with all this other stuff. And I've always been into health kind of intrinsically, and I don't know how to describe it. I sensed that the food I was eating was dead. And I started thinking just logically, okay, if this animal was alive a month ago and I'm just eating it now, and I didn't really have an understanding of biology and like protein breakdown and that kind of thing, but it started off this desire to just harvest my own meat or raise my own animals or just get closer to whenever that animal was alive and be dealing with better quality stuff, because I just intrinsically sensed the stuff from the store wasn't very good. And so the first direction I went was, well, maybe it's other animals that I should be eating. And that was fun, right? There was this time, so remember Cecil the lion during the Obama years, that whole thing?
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the rules that he made after that was you can't bring back meat from a lion hunt, or you can't buy it. And I was saving up at the time because I had a supplier to buy like lion meat, and I wanted to try it so bad.
No way.
And it was like $5,000 a pound or something crazy. It would have taken me forever. I was making $7.25 an hour, but so I never got to try lion meat. But it got outlawed while I was saving up for it. So that's really how that was the genesis of me being interested in harvesting my own meat. And then I started thinking, and also that in combination with just looking around and seeing everybody having peanut allergies and dairy allergies and early onset arthritis and all these other things. And, this one's allergic to fresh fruits and vegetables. This one's allergic to this and that and the other. And I was like, this is not the way that what changed? And that's a whole separate conversation, right? But I had an intrinsic understanding that we were sick, and that when nobody knew what a calorie was and people thought that smoking was good for you, everybody lived longer and they were more vibrant and they were healthier. Why was that? Well, one of the things that I deduced it to was, we didn't have this mass-produced meat, and people were eating meat that was eating clean, that they were harvesting themselves, and there was a lot more self-sufficiency. So that's how I started going down the route of an interest in it. So the interest in hunting probably started when I was like 13 or 14. But approaching how to hunt or anything about this world, if you don't come from it, is very intimidating. So it wasn't until another 5 years and a whole journey throughout those 5 years until I actually started doing anything.
Started that process.
Right. And so what actually kick-started the process for me was Meat Eater. I found Meat Eater on Netflix. And
how old are you now, by the way?
31.
31. Okay.
Yeah.
But so you kind of started, if I'm catching on to your timeline, you were like 18 or 19, you started looking for, information about it?
So I started watching Meat Eater probably when I was like 17.
Okay.
And then it was a few years of like watching those seasons before it was like, okay, I feel confident enough that I can do something. Steve Rinella talks about translating the hunter's world for the everyday man, and that was really true of me. But it took a while because I'm seeing gear I don't understand. I don't have experience with firearms. I don't know anything about these animals. I can't go to the places he's going to. I don't have the budget to get into this thing. Even something as simple as like getting a license and going to hunter education just seems like it's a whole world and culture and types of people that I'm just like not familiar with at all. So it took a while for me to watch it and gain the belief that like I could go do this on my own, right? Part of that was the girl I was dating, who's now my wife. Her dad has been hunting deer for like 40-something years.
There you go.
So we started talking about that, and that made it a little bit more attainable to me. And I hadn't hunted with him yet. He hadn't taken me out. I hadn't done that. I don't even know if I'd shown the interest to him necessarily that I wanted to do it. But knowing that he did it made it attainable because he's just a regular guy, right? He's a great guy, great man. But I knew him, right? He wasn't behind a screen backpacking through the mountains of Montana,
right?
With a llama packing, gear and, standing a teepee and shooting an elk at 650 yards. So those two things in combination brought me to the point where it's like one day I just found out how to find WMAs in New Hampshire, and I just went out and started scouting and started finding stuff.
So you ended up taking your hunter safety course and all that. Did you start out with guns or did you start out with archery?
I started out with guns.
Okay.
So archery was a later addition because my father-in-law hunts with firearms. And so I didn't even know really that there was like a separate bow season at that point in time. I just thought that everybody hunted with guns, and if you hunted with bows, it's just because you liked bows or something. And then quickly I learned that that wasn't the case. So eventually I started bow hunting to extend the season primarily, to be able to hunt earlier because, you hunt bows, you extend the season by like 3 months.
Yeah, especially in New Hampshire.
Yeah. September 15th, you can start hunt. September 15th to December 15th, you can bow hunt deer, but like firearm is like 3 weeks in November or whatever, 4 weeks in November. And I'm a baby, like I have tropical blood, so like I grew up here, I can handle the cold, but I like the weather and hunting in October instead of when it's like 11 degrees in late November or whatever. But I'll do it if I can get out. I'll do it.
So was the whole gun thing a new experience for you too? Because that's an intimidating thing in itself if you didn't grow up around it.
Totally. That was one of the biggest barriers. My dad was I will not have a gun in this house. His experience growing up in the ghetto with guns was totally different. So everybody out here had dogs around, they had guns, they had all sorts of stuff that we just didn't have. It wasn't part of my parents', experiential DNA. So that was a big thing. And my father-in-law took me to the range to shoot his 30-30 and taught me some basic stuff around that. That
Great
was
first gun to start shooting.
Yeah. That was pretty sweet.
It's not a 22, so it gives you a little bit of a kick, so you can feel it and get that feedback right away. And it's the gun that's killed the most deer in America. In deer hunting history, there's that 30-30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like it's one of like the lever action, like Winchester 94, whatever. And it was fairly new to him at the time. So looking back, it was really kind of him to bring me out to the range and let me use that gun because it was a newer gun to him, and he really loves that gun. And so I got to shoot that a little bit, and then that just kind of gave me okay, I can do this. The firearm's not going to shoot itself, right? Like, all these things. Because, when you don't grow up around firearms, there's this thing around it, like almost like they have a life of their own. And, if you make one mistake, you could, kill somebody. I mean, technically that's true. Mm-hmm. But if you approach the tool with respect and you practice and do your due diligence, like you're not going to, you have to make a mistake. It's not going to do anything on its own, which is obvious common sense, but that's not the way you feel when you haven't grown up shooting guns. And it's like, even I see it and it's so loud, and it's like, am I going to hurt myself? Am I going to break my collarbone if I don't have this in the right spot? Like, am I comfortable doing this without somebody else here who knows what they're doing? So that was a big part of the genesis of being comfortable with doing it. Now I have a safe full of guns, but
Nice.
It didn't start that way.
Do you have a 30-30?
I don't have a 30-30, actually. That needs to be added to the arsenal. I've got like 3 shotguns, and I have a 308. I've got a 300 Win Mag. I've got like a massive like elk gun, which is totally overkill for here. But the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation made like 900 of these special edition guns.
Quite a few people hunt deer with a 300 Win Mag too.
Yeah,
it is a versatile cartridge.
If you don't want to track them and you just want to drop them right there, that'll do it.
Yeah.
You might ruin some meat along the way, but that'll do it.
Plus, it's a great bear gun, and if you ever get lucky enough to get a moose tag, you've been putting in for moose tags or anything?
I've been putting in for moose. I did miss one year, though, and in New Hampshire, if you miss a year, it's like you get kicked back to the beginning, so I'm probably still, 15 years out from winning that one.
You should throw into the main one, too, because that's just like the main moose hunt is iconic. I've only started doing it the last couple of years, but yeah, you should definitely throw $20 into there every year.
What I love about, people complain about cost, and obviously everybody's at different places with finances and whatnot, but generally speaking, like, tags aren't that expensive, especially in the Northeast. You could easily throw them for another state.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not bad. So you can, there's a lot of experience that you can get for relatively short money. Yeah. In these states out here.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast for listeners out, because a lot of people that listen to the podcast are like you. They're new hunters, or they're interested in it, and they don't really know what that whole process entails. So I want you to just continue on kind of your journey from, I think we left off where you were at the range and you got past the gun thing. You're like, okay, this won't shoot itself. What happened after that?
So after that, I started scouting. Right, so I started reading some of the meat eater stuff on their website, and I figured out, okay, I can go to the state of New Hampshire website, Fish and Game, I can see these places. And so I didn't really know what I was looking for, but there was almost validation going out there and just finding some sign that these animals actually are out here, and they are hypothetically findable.
And did you just go out on your own, or did your father-in-law, take you out to do any scouting? Like, because one of the things I'll stress for people who are new to it is find a mentor. There's so many people out there that are willing to take you out. I mean, even like at Huntstock, you've been going the last few years. Even like some of these guys that you think are, they're the greatest hunters alive. Some of these seminar speakers, you'd be surprised if you just talked with one of them, you'd get an invite. Hey, I'll take you out free of charge and just show you some things. Like so many people in the hunting community are willing to do that.
So many. And, that came for me later. right? I started scouting on my own, and then the mentorship through my father-in-law, it started with him. He did take me out scouting as well, after I had unsuccessfully scouted myself. But, you know, I saw a couple things here and there, right? And so, and he's got a really trained woods eye, right? He's been hunting for like 40-something years at this point. And then there was a guy at my church at the time, and his family had a property in New Hampshire, and it was kind of like, you know, the cousins and the uncles and, you know, the friends that get the invite are all able to hunt this property. And so I've been able to hunt that property, and that's really where I learned, you know, most of what I know. And that's when I was with a group of not just my father-in-law, but other guys that have had success hunting and have been doing it for a long time. And I saw people, you know, pull deer out of the woods. And that hasn't been me yet, but I saw other people doing it, and I got to learn from those experiences. So the mentorship came that way. And then, you know, around this tradition of hunting, it's very tribal, but like in a good way.
Yeah.
Right? People are loyal to each other. Relationships are built around it. So I reconnected with a guy who's now one of my best friends. He was one of my old basketball teammates. Hadn't talked to him in years. And I think he posted something on Facebook about hunting or fishing or something. So I just called him up, and I was like, and he was like, "You hunt?" And all of a sudden there was this new platform to our relationship.
Yeah.
And that kicked off, and he recently moved, so he's got some property elsewhere that hopefully I'll get to hunt this year, but unfortunately he's not here for me to hunt these woods anymore. But man, we burned the boot leather scouting together. You know, he shot deer, I helped him drag his deer, helped him cut up his deer, we shared intel, all that kind of thing. But that relationship wouldn't be where it is today if it wasn't for the hunting thing. So the community is very tight-knit. Everybody has an interest in passing this on to new people, because if we don't, it's going to die, right? We got to get our kids in it. We got to bring people that aren't generationally just growing up in it into it. Because when you look at all, you know, everybody talks about these regulations and these referendums when they show up. But the reason why these referendums show up is because it's not important to the general voting populace. And then we end up having to, you know, pull it back from the cliff when it looks like we may lose a vote, and we may lose, right, you know, the right to bait bears or to, you know, hunt certain lands or whatever the case is. And the fight really starts way before then. We need to be getting people in with an interest in preserving this in the first place.
Yeah, hunters are pretty reactionary, and they're not proactive in general.
Right.
Is what I've noticed. But that's one of the really special things I think about Huntstock is it gets everybody into the same place at the same time, where you feel like, whoa, look what we can do when we all come together. Like, you really can do some powerful things. Even like the way that we're, we bring a blood tracking dog, Mike LaFleur, who's from New Hampshire, your home state. I don't know if you ever sat in on his seminars or watched the dog work. I did, and stuff. Yep. You know, that's illegal in Massachusetts to use a dog to help recover wounded game. But having him there, having Mass Wildlife there, having the environmental police there, it's kind of like they're starting to warm up to this idea, you know, because they see it in action. They see the dog's not going to – he's on a leash. He's not scaring all the game. He's not bothering anybody out there. He's not putting added pressure onto the herd. You know, I think we're going to see like actual change just from the community coming together. And if we continue to do that, we can get ahead of all of these things, and we can showcase in the right way to non-hunters out there and the general voting public that we're not just a bunch of Neanderthals out there drinking beer and shooting deer for the thrill of a kill. You know, you got into it for the food.
Yep.
Yeah. Why don't you talk a little more about the food? Like, when was the first time that you tried venison?
First time I tried venison is I bought it from that store, right? That's the first time that I tried venison, which is farm-raised venison from New Zealand or something like that. The first time I ate it, game venison is from a deer that my father-in-law shot in Pennsylvania. And so he gave me some of that deer, and that was awesome. And when I think about hunting, it's not just about the preseason scouting. It's not just about actually executing on the shot and recovering the animal. To me, it's all the way through the process of dressing it, butchering it, and making that into food that I can now eat. And my culinary standards are so high. I'm in finance right now, but like I said, I've always had an interest in culinary. So at one point, I had a partial scholarship to Le Cordon Bleu, and that's the route I was going to go. Wow. So I was going to go to Sydney, Australia, and cook for a year, and then I was going to go to Paris, and I was going to do that thing. Thank God I didn't do that. That would have been a much different life than what I have right now. But I think about everything, even in terms of shot placement. Lethality first, second, I'm thinking
Save the meat.
Right? Like I think about everything in that sense. So it was, so butchering the animal came natural to me. So I never had any formal training. I watched like one video and I did a whole deer like at once. So
Good for you, man.
Didn't even there was no on ramp. I didn't watch anybody do it. I've taken roadkill deer even when I knew the meat was bad, just so I could butcher the whole thing, so I could practice. I ate some bear yesterday that was roadkill bear in New Hampshire that I butchered myself. Me and this cop picked up this bear and stuffed it into the back of my Hyundai Sonata at the time. And
so from yesterday to today, you already butchered a whole bear?
No, I ate some of it yesterday.
Yeah.
But this was a few years ago, and my wife called me like early in the morning on the way down taking the kids to school, and she's like, I thought it was a tire on the side of the road, but it has ears. I think that's a bear. And at this point, I had gotten into bear hunting, and that's primarily, I mean, I love all of it, but bear hunting is probably like my number one thing, right? So I'm really excited about this year. There's this bear that I'm getting on my camera like every single day. I've got a great bait spot, right? This is the year that I'm going to take down a bear, whether it's 300 pounds or 150 pounds. If it's a good eater bear, I don't even care.
Yeah.
And so she knows I'm bear crazy. And then this buddy that I talked to about that I reconnected with, his way to work was on the same part of the highway. So he calls me like 20 minutes later and he's like, dude, there's this bear on the side of the highway. So I call Fish and Game for a roadkill tag. And they're like, we can't get anybody down there for a few hours, but, go check it out, see if it's good or whatever. Now, that day it was going to get up to 66 degrees. But at this point, it was like 30 degrees, like early in the morning. So I went down there. I'm looking at it. And I have Fish and Game on the line, and I can't take it without a roadkill tag. And then this cop pulls up behind me. And he's like, hey, just so you know, you can't take that bear without a tag. And I was like, oh, yeah, I know. I'm actually on with Fish and Game right now. So because I was on the phone with them, he was able to get on the phone with them on my phone. And they were like, yeah, we can't get down there for a couple hours. We'll meet him later. Just let him take it. And so me and this cop picked up this bear, and it got hit in the head too. So most of the meat was still good. Its brain was like soup, but I guess it was running across and probably some semi truck or whatever, just hit the head. But I was able to butcher that whole thing up, and me and my kids were eating some of that bear yesterday. That was a couple of years ago now.
Awesome. Yeah. So what do you think it was about bear? Why'd you get the bear bug? Why is that your thing?
So I think I've been thinking about this a lot. I think it's a few things, right? Number one, just maybe adrenaline isn't the right word, but chasing something that's capable of killing me is very fun.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. It's not even like the reason to hunt it is a thrill of a kill, but just the majesty of that animal, the complexity of that animal. I really like the hunting methods, so I feel like I get to be more in the chase if I'm baiting.
Yeah.
Than just kind of scouting and sitting and hoping that it walks by me today. I mean, I know that's really not the whole of deer hunting. It's more technical than that. But I'm bringing the bears into me, which is difficult. It's still fair chase. It's not like you just throw a pile of donuts out there and you kill a bear. But I feel like I'm more in the chase. And then the third thing is I love the history of the American conservation story that is the bear. I love the role that it played in building up this country into a net exporter, right, and becoming, a net exporter instead of importer from Europe. And the meat is amazing. It's my favorite meat. I would eat it all the time if I could.
Can you talk more about that history? I'm not fully aware of how the bear transformed us into a net exporter.
Well, it had a role in doing that. So we became a net exporter by exporting pelts.
Yeah.
It was primarily beaver and mink pelts to Europe.
A lot of beaver, yep.
But, the most versatile game animal for these mountain men was bear because the pelts were used for clothing. The fat could be rendered, and it was still liquid at room temperature, so it could be used to condition leather. It could be used as waterproofing steel. Really high smoke point, so it was really good for cooking. The meat preserved really, really well, and there was enough fat content to keep their energy up. So primarily, right, like they hunted deer because it was more available, but the prize food of the men that actually went out and trapped beaver and mink was bear. And bear is what kept them going. And
probably with the natives too.
Yeah, it was the most versatile game, and they learned a lot of that from the natives.
Yeah.
And so it's just such a prized thing. And because of that, right, bear almost was off the landscape by the mid-1900s, like a lot of animals. And the conservation story, I mean, now bear is back in good numbers in 60% of its original range in a relatively short period of time. So we think about restoring elk, we think about the wolves and the grizzly problem, we think about a lot of these things, throughout a lot of the United States. The blueprint that has been successful is bear. And as a result, we get to enjoy it through hounds, through bait, through spot and stock. We get to enjoy it in many more states. I think there's like 12 states that allow baiting now. But I know Arkansas brought their season back in like 2001. New Hampshire just upped the amount of bears you can take because now we got so many bears in the whites, and in the whites you can take 2. So I love being, I love being part of that, part of it.
Yeah, it's super cool. I was talking to quite a few bear hunters at Huntstock this year, and one of the things that I don't remember who exactly this was. Might have been Dan Wagner. Did you meet him from?
No.
Great Northern Outfitters. He was there, and he loves bear hunting. He's bringing Dan Infault for a bear hunt this year,
let's go.
which is going to be cool. Dan's excited. Dan's a big bear baiter too. He has a really successful bear camp in Minnesota. And they say, like what you were saying, you're a part of it, and doing all the work is rewarding with all the baiting and setting up a good bait site. And the fact that you're going in there, and the bear they have to get conditioned to you. They know you're going in there, and they know that you mean food. When they smell you after you're gone, or maybe they see you or smell you while you're doing it. But they become conditioned to you, and they know that when they're going in there, they're risking their life because that's a human. Humans mean bad, but there's food there. So they come in extra cautiously because they know that they're risking their life to get that food. So you have to really play. I just think I've never done it. I've never bear baited. I went and hunted bear last year and got one with my bow, which was awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, that was a really fun experience. But when you are actually the one doing the baiting and setting up your own site, I would imagine it's so much more rewarding.
There's a lot of similarities to the avid deer hunters, right? Where it's all the preseason scouting, right? And you're out there in the freezing cold and you're doing all these things that make the end result so much more rewarding. With bear, baiting is hard. You're bringing in hundreds of pounds of food, getting access to that food and fry grease or whatever is difficult. It's early September. It's still hot. 90 degrees outside. Yeah. You're drenched in sweat, getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. I mean, if anybody's thinking about bear baiting, I'm selling it really well right now. But when you finally get a bear, it is very much not just go out, sit in a stand, throw a pile of donuts out, and spray the leaves with some scent and see what happens. One thing I love about bear as well, as a family guy, and a lot of people that listen to this podcast, they have jobs, they have families, they can't hunt as much as they probably would like to hunt, right? And we're all battling that to some extent. With bears, you're always in it with the action. You know what I mean? Right. Even if you're not in the stand at the time that the bear comes, you're getting bears on your cameras. So you have inventory, they're there to an extent, because you're getting them on your cameras. You can pattern them. Right. So there's just an element of being in it, and that it can happen at any time is so much more heightened because you actually have evidence of it. Right.
And that you can just bring more food. If the food's out and you're busy with life and work or whatever and family, that when you go back in there and you load that bait back up, then you're back in it when you sit in your stand.
You're back in it when you sit in your stand. And that bear that's on it can be tracking that all throughout the woods, and you can bring new bears onto it at any time. Here's something I really, really enjoy about the bear baiting specifically. As a family guy, right, you come home, you cook dinner, maybe your spouse is cooking dinner, the baby spits up on you, whatever. Deer hunters have to be so worried about scent control.
Yeah.
Because So it's like, you spend all this money on this airtight thing and putting your like scent block stuff in this bin and, and it's like, you got to wash your hands before you even open it and you pick that thing up because the game is you're trying to be a ghost. You don't want the deer to know you're there. With bear, you just accept the bear knows you're there. You can't beat a bear's nose. It's impossible. So what you're trying to do is condition the bear, again, to be okay with the fact that you're there or lower his defenses to the point where he's willing to go get the food anyway. So when I bear bait, the shirt that I bait in, I hang that in the tree by my stand. So it's drenched in sweat. It was 90 degrees outside. It's disgusting. But every single time he comes into that bait, whether I'm in there or not, I want him to smell me, and I want it to be as smelly as possible. Because I want him to get used to the fact that my smell's always around, so that one day when I am sitting in the stand and he comes in and he's eating, he's okay with it. So that also makes it easier in my mind to prepare because I'm not concerned about things that I would be concerned about, for the deer season.
Well, I would say, just push back a little bit on the deer. You can't beat a deer's nose either. And everybody's got different ideas on whether they want to take scent control to the next level or not. And, I started out a couple years ago trying to take that really seriously. And I got to the point where I was like, it's not worth it for me to take scent control as seriously because it's just another thing on the list that you have to do every day, or it's just time consuming. And if you just can't beat a deer's nose either. They're going to know you're there if they come across your wind trail. So I've just been playing the wind, and I think that you have to just play the wind. Don't in my opinion, worrying about scent control too much can ruin your experience hunting because it just becomes a hassle. So I think the bear's becoming conditioned to you because you're bringing it food, and I agree with all of that. But I don't think it's too dissimilar. Like Dan Infalt doesn't believe in it at all, plays the wind only, goes out in his work clothes to hunt deer. He just has to have the right wind. And I think you just have to have the right wind no matter what.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of truth to that because I have wondered a lot of times. It's like, guys used to go out in a red flannel smoking cigarettes and still kill deer. So why do we need, this stuff, where we buy camo that's like $125 a shirt to have this scent block technology in it? We're spraying everything down. It's like, is this really necessary? Like, I don't know. I don't think it's necessary. I think some of the scent stuff with attractants, right? So if you're talking about scent where where you're scenting a licking branch to draw in bucks or get up that competitive drive or something. Okay, I see some evidence for that. The scent control stuff on deer, I have it, but it's been unclear to me. I've been out with some hunting parties with guys that just like don't shower and never use any of that stuff, and it's 30 minutes into first light and they're killing something and I'm not. So
yeah,
what do I know?
I do think there's a little bit. I do think there's measures you can take to limit your scent, which maybe it won't carry as far. So there's some things you can do, but I would just caution people that are new to hunting or in their first, the beginning of their journey in hunting. Don't think that you have to take crazy measures because I think you can overthink it and then it can become not fun if you're overthinking things. And you want to have fun. Find a consistent wind and hunt with the wind in your face as much as possible, blowing into a direction that the deer are not bedding when you're sitting in your stand. Just play the wind. I think you'll and then you can, as you get more comfortable with hunting and you get your own strategy and you develop your own your own methods and your own tactics that work for you, then you can start tweaking things if you want. You can get a little bit more serious about it if you think that is what's going to help you be more successful. But it can turn people off. I got to a point a few years ago where I started thinking, man, this is I'm overthinking literally everything. And if you're overthinking everything, you are not seeing the woods clearly. You're not having fun. As soon as you get over that fact of not overthinking, and the woods become so much more easy to read once you get to that point. And for me, it was dropping all of the scent control stuff, because it was taking too much of my brain power, and I was thinking about that too much that I wasn't able to read the woods. And as soon as you let that go, the woods open up and you're like, oh wow, now I can see things so much more clearly.
Absolutely. And what you mentioned there this is worth digging in on, right? Because, scent control, ground scent versus wind scent, this and that, the other, being a technician with what we do versus being instinctual with what we do. For a lot of hunters, we've got mitigating factors present in our lives. And most of us approach it as if the mitigating factors are a lack of knowledge, or our gear isn't good enough, or there's this new thing that, this other hunter has that we don't have that's going to bring us to the next level. And for most of us, it's intention and time, right? It's like thinking through it ahead of time. It's staying within our zone of genius, right? You can't be great at everything, but you can be successful if you're great at one or two things that compensate for maybe the other things that you're not as great at. Or maybe you find that scent control doesn't really matter in your case, or the wind is what matters. Whatever the case is, it's like what I've tried to do these last few years in hunting is I kind of graduate to being my own hunter instead of just being a copycat for other people that I've been out with when I didn't know what I was doing. Not to say that I know what I'm doing now, but I know what I'm doing more than I did then and over the last few years is pick your spots. I set days ahead of time in January that I will be going out scouting during the year. I block off those times to the extent that I can to be able to hunt with intention. And I do what I can to try to keep it fun. There was a couple of years ago where just the business, there's all sorts of things going on. We had a baby, whatnot.
You have 5 kids, right?
I have 5 kids, yeah. My oldest is 7, and my youngest is 7 months, and I got no twins. So you can imagine how hunting season's been, for the last few years, which is, it's a season of life. Nothing wrong with it. But there was this one season where I hunted maybe 1 or 2 weeks, and then I was done because it wasn't fun. And it was almost like the obligation to myself to go out and hunt with the lack of time that I had to do it. Every time I went out, I just felt like I was cheating myself because I think about this all year. I make these preparations. I invest in this gear and whatever. And at the end of the day, I just got out of my last meeting. It's 3:30 in the afternoon. I can only hunt this one spot because I can get to it in 20 minutes and it's going to be dark in an hour. And I'm basically just taking an armed hike through the woods, hoping I'm playing a lottery card. And all the preparation that I spent, then is useless. And then I leave feeling worse than. So the reason I bring that up is to say it has to be fun. You're not going to be engaged if you're not having fun.
You were putting too much pressure on yourself.
So much pressure. And then you're not even good at it when you're out there and you're not having fun. You're not good at it. Your chances of success are very low. You're not focused. Yeah. So whatever we can do to right size this for your own life, you can only do what you can do. Maybe there's a season of life where I'll be able to be taking all these trips all the time and hunting more often than I hunt right now. I can certainly increase the amount I can hunt if I plan with intention, but whatever is the right size for your life, take it and run with it and maximize what that is. And don't compare yourself to other people or try to make it something it's not, or else you're not going to have success and you're not going to have fun.
Yeah, you should never be putting pressure on yourself when you're hunting because then you're never going to get the full experience. You're not going to enjoy the fruits of it if you're always out there putting pressure on yourself. And I've interviewed a lot of people on the podcast. I've interviewed people who started content channels or started a podcast, and I always encourage doing that. But some of those people will get so far into their head because now they started a channel or they started a show or something, and they're like, I need to show results or nobody's going to follow me. Like that can't be further from the truth. All you need to do is take people along on your journey. Don't ever think I got to kill a big buck or I got to kill multiple bucks in a year. It's like if you're thinking about that at all while you're out there hunting, you are not getting the experience that God gave us to go out there and hunt, and what that's supposed to do and what that's supposed to mean to your life.
Absolutely. I mean, think about, the time that we spend doom scrolling, the amount of time that work takes out of us, we know what's going on the other side of the world. As humans, we deal with more stimulation than God intended us for, than God created us to deal with. And hunting is one of the only things I can do where I can shut that all off. That in and of itself is a fruit of the activity, right? I get to go out in God's creation and see how awesome he is because I can be still and see stuff that I never would have seen before. That's a fruit of the activity. I have mental clarity to think, whether it's about my marriage, family, business, prayer, right? I have the space to do that. I don't have the space to do that in the other places in my life. That's a fruit of the activity. I can keep connections with friends alive that I wouldn't otherwise really easily be able to keep connections with because of where they live or whatever the case is. That's a fruit of the activity. So it's different for every individual person, but the it sounds cliche when I say the point isn't the harvest, right? Like we're going out, you play to win the game, right? But it's not wasted time because you didn't harvest. And I think if you approach it the right way, it can irrigate the garden of your life in so many ways that's so far above and beyond simply the days you spend out there, whether you're killing something or not.
Yeah, I was at the gym the other day. That's something we do as a family a lot. We go to the gym. Kids get to be in the daycare. We hang out at the pool. I play basketball a lot. I've been really getting into basketball a lot more this summer. But I was at the gym, and kids were in the pool with my wife, and I popped over to the hot tub for a little bit. And this was right after Huntstock, so I'm working in there a little on my phone. I've got 10 minutes in the hot tub, and there's a guy over on the other side of the hot tub, and he looks around, he sees everybody's on their phones, and he's like, boy, the phones have really taken over, huh? And he was an interesting dude, and when he said that, I put my phone down, and we started talking, and I was like, yeah, it's just really hard when you own your own business, and you're constantly connected. It's hard to be able to put it down, but I agree with you. There's phones are a little bit too much. Having all that access to that information on your fingertips, in your pocket constantly, it can be too much. And we started talking about, he asked what I did for work, and I told him about Huntstock, and for him, he plays the guitar and he goes to music festivals and he loves live music, and that's how he, disconnects, and that's his place where he can let his mind kind of be free. And I was talking about how hunting is that's my version of that. I get out into the woods, and your mind can be free, and I'm guilty of looking at my phone while I'm in the woods sometimes too. But, there's just nothing like being out there in nature, putting your phone down, and being able to just free your mind on like all the things you talked about, thinking about your business, thinking about your family, thinking about your motivations, your goals and everything, thinking about becoming a better person and how you can help, change things like that. That's what hunting is to me. But I just loved that conversation with that guy. And he was a vegan, and he said... He said, I haven't eaten, an animal since like 1979 or something like that. But he was interested in the fact that, he's like, but if I did eat meat again, or I would want to do what you're doing and get out and harvest it myself. It's really cool that you can find common ground with people that are vegans or have opposing views of you or live a different lifestyle. I think too many people think that, anti-hunters or vegans or whatever are just naturally your enemy if you're a hunter. And I just don't think that can't be further than the truth. They have a different perspective on it just because of, it might be a what do you call that? A stereotype that they're just believing in their head, but they've never had a long conversation with somebody about why people are actually out hunting. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, it's like they saw the dentist kill Cecil the lion and they just hate hunters or whatever the case is. I was in San Diego for a business trip a couple months ago, and I was wearing my Make America Healthy Again hat or whatever, and this lady, actually no, I wasn't wearing that hat. I was wearing my ribeye hat. It's literally a hat with just like a massive ribeye on it. And this lady, I was waiting for my pickup ride from the airport or whatever, and she was there, and I saw her looking at me, and I was like, what's going on? And she's like, I was just looking at your hat. Same thing. She was a vegan, but we started talking about, sourcing our own food and our lost connection to food and, all that kind of thing. And we found a lot of common ground, even though she's a vegan and doesn't hunt. But she was actually very, she really appreciated kind of the way I approached things and what I was doing. And so there's so many things about this activity of hunting, and you look at other cultures in the world. You look at the Hadza tribe, one of the last hunter-gatherer groups of people still around in the world.
Where's that?
Where's that in Africa? Is that in Zambia? Don't quote me on the country, but it's in Africa, right? And hunting is a social thing. Hunting is a rite of passage. Hunting is a way that you learn to do teamwork. Hunting is a way that boys grow into men. If you look at all the people groups, basically in the entire history of the world, hunting always meant more than just the harvest. Hunting was always something else. Hunting was always a way to interact with God's creation. It was always a way to be filled with wonder and awe for what you're seeing. It was social. It was all these other things. And so when we think about why it's important to do things like Huntstock, right, especially in the Northeast, right, because you know what, we should talk about this. Most hunting content, and I'm a business guy, right, like that's what, I have a finance business. I'm a business guy. And, there's been private equity flowing a little bit into some hunting content over the last few years. I know the Churning Group bought Meat Eater and, Rise Run Capital buying ducks, waterfowl, and all this kinds of stuff, right? So there's definitely profit margin. There's interest in this kind of content across the country. Most of the content is either Midwestern content, most of it's Western content, and some of it's Southern content. It's like not Northeast content at all. And America was settled out here. So a lot of the communities here, America was settled here, and then these sprawling settlements kind of, their arms went out, but there was no city planning. We have so many people in such a small space. Mm-hmm. Our roads don't make sense, right? Like the people density versus the animal density ratios are really bad. So a lot of times, if you're just taking in stuff on YouTube, it can be this utopian representation of this person that has access to like some sort of like massive ranch out in Montana taking these massive elk, which isn't an animal that I can hunt here. And it's not a situation that it's just not, it's not the same. What Huntstock has done is it brings people from the Northeast together. I know it's going Midwest, but started out here in the Northeast. And why that's significant is because the hunt here is different. And it's harder. To your point, you've had a lot of success hunting. You and Pat Burns, there's a lot of people that have pulled a lot of bucks, shot a lot of bears. But the common story is not success every year out here. The most common story is not having success in most years. Mm-hmm. And it being a great year when you get one. If it's brown, it's down, right? Like, if it's a doe or if it's a buck, I'd prefer a buck. But, if it's bow season and there's a doe and I got a good shot, for most people, they're shooting it. I think in New Hampshire, it's an average of like, if you do it by tags and harvest, it's like every 10 years, somebody that gets a tag actually kills a deer. So obviously there's some stratification there. There's some people that get their tags every year, don't hunt every year. They're weekend warriors or whatever the case is. And then there's the more diehards. But the point is, it's really tough. There in New Hampshire, there's an average of 10.69 deer per square mile. You go out to Wisconsin, you go out a lot of these places. You go to Iowa, a lot of places, there's like 50 deer. Some counties in Iowa, there's 70 deer per square mile. So on average in the state, New Hampshire ranks number 17 out of the 50 states in terms of public land. So it's not like we have no public land available for people to hunt. A fair amount of the state is public land. And still, the average statewide is under 11 deer per square mile.
There's some places not too far from here that have 80 deer per square mile.
You find those pockets.
Yeah, there's pockets in every state for sure.
And a lot of that is like,
suburban sprawl and urban sprawl, and that's where you see and where there's laws against hunting or the restrictions against it that allow them to,
right,
populate.
The biggest bucks I ever got on camera were in a town forest in a super populated town in New Hampshire. And basically, I just had this thought, and I'm like, I'm doing all this Onyx scouting, and I'm watching all these YouTube videos on how to read like this and cross-referencing with Google Maps so I can tell if that tree cover is white oak or red oak or this or that, the other. And then I was like, wait a minute. I know that there's deer around. So instead of trying to use these land features to pattern the deer, can I use people to pattern the deer? And I started looking at this small like town forest and where all the trails were, and I'd been in it before, so I know everybody's in there all the time and everybody's walking their dog. Well, the deer aren't going to be where people are walking their dog. So if the deer need to get from this swamp on this side, they need to get to the other side, which way are they going to have to go to avoid all the people? And all the trails in that town forest actually niched down.
Yeah, you can
the places where, mm-hmm. And next thing you know, I throw up a camera, and I had 2 bucks, and both of them had to be over 200 pounds, like within one day, just walking right by the camera. In fact, one of the spots was like behind like a brush line, But from the stand, I could literally look down on the path and see people walking their dog. The deer were just moving on the other side of the brush line.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a lot of opportunity if you look at things correctly. And to your point, I think there's different stages, especially when you're a new hunter getting into it. You start as a technician. Teach me the math equation. Teach me the gear. Teach me this. Teach me all the tactics, drinking from a fire hose. And then you get to the point where you start to eliminate some of those things. You're like, okay, what of these things am I going to really lean into? And then eventually you get to the point of mastery, which I'm not yet at, right? But where you're driven more by instinct and what you've seen before rather than what you learned from somebody that taught you. And I think that that's like a long progression here. But, a lot of the tactics early on can drown you because you're trying out, if you don't try something out for a few years, it's hard to really know that it works.
Yeah, all you're doing is like a long-term experiment.
Right.
It's,
you need a control group.
Yeah, and you can't really have a control when you're hunting. There's no control group, and you're not doing it in a lab. It's wild animals, and there's so many factors. Yeah, and I think what you said about the Northeast is it's interesting, and it's 100% true. Like the tradition is the deepest up here because this is where we all settled. This is where the settlers started. This is where the population centers, grew in the beginning. And so the tradition in the Northeast is the strongest in the country, just by fact of it. We were the Northeast is the earliest settled place in the country. And then the opportunity here, we have so much public land, which isn't the case in a lot of the country. We have so many hunters, and it's really hard comparatively to other places to hunt here. But all of those factors are also the reasons why we don't get a lot of love in media. You don't get a lot of content, although now it's starting to change. There's quite a few podcasts here now. There's a lot of great YouTube channels. The people making good films like that entered into the Huntstock Film Festival and stuff. Like you're starting to see that change a little bit, and that was one of the things I was most proud of when in this 4-year journey with Huntstock so far and it was one of my goals in the beginning, just bring some of that interest from the big hunting industry back to the Northeast and getting brands like Quiet Cat and Vortex and Onyx and these brands that have typically been, like you said, centered around Midwest and Western style hunting, bringing them up to the Northeast, showing them what the incredible community that we have here and then how deep the traditions run up here. That's been great. And I also, like, as a business person too, thinking about it a little bit as how to grow the Huntstock as a business enterprise. I like the challenge of doing it in an underserved market. I could have done the first Huntstock out in the Midwest. I could have done the first Huntstock, in Michigan or something where there's, or Pennsylvania where there's 1 million hunters and there's a ton of shows. But I liked the challenge of trying to transform the Northeast back into a place that gets attention and back into just a super strong community in the traditions. And I was talking with Dan Infalt about this the other day too, because we are going to the Midwest next year. He's like, it wouldn't be a bad idea to do one in Michigan. And a lot of people are sending me messages. You should do one in Michigan. I get it all the time. Bring one to Pennsylvania. I don't want to do too many Huntstocks. I want to have it be a regional thing that people drive and travel. They make a time commitment of 4 to 6 hours, and they're like, it's special enough that people want to take that long trip and spend the whole weekend, because that's what Woodstock was. And we did kind of get inspiration from Woodstock for Huntstock. It was just like, that was a magical experience for anybody who was at Woodstock 69. You hear about it. It's legendary. Everybody came together and just loved each other and listened to music, and everybody was on the same wavelength for a week. And that's what we're doing with Huntstock. But when I was talking with Dan, and I was like, I like the idea of bringing, because he told me, there's one good show in Wisconsin. There's one good hunting show every year, and if you look at it, it's not even, it's not that great. Huntstock blows it out of the water. He said, the level of seminar speakers you guys have, the community, like the energy level there. If you go to that one show in Wisconsin, there might be 25,000 people there, and they sell out of their exhibitor booths every year, but the experience is on just, it's much different and lower energy levels than Huntstock. And I like that. I don't want to bring the show somewhere where there's a million shows going on. I want to go somewhere that's underserved. And Wisconsin has the most Boone and Crockett entries in the whole state. It's a big buck state, and they've been underserved traditionally. So I like bringing it there because being able to change a community and bring something that is exciting somewhere where it hasn't happened before or it's been forgotten for a little bit, that's the challenge I enjoy.
And you mentioned so many important things there, but if you're a content creator out there or you're thinking about getting into the hunting business at any part of it, it's so important that we know how to run good businesses. It's so important that we know how to do that. It's so important that we know not to take advantage of people. But if you look at how hunting has been able to be preserved and propagated in the West, a lot of it is because of the capital that flows into the industry out there. If you look at it out here, what you're doing with Huntstock is incredible. I mean, I know a bunch of people that I've been, when I outline my story, years of watching content, I was watching a lot of these people. I didn't think I'd ever get to meet these people. And now I see these people every year and it's like, hey, how you doing? How was last season, right? Like that's a whole...
And they become your friends and you keep in touch with them.
Yeah. And it's like, but you can't do Huntstock. You can't accomplish something because I think it's important to note, right? We all have value systems attached to this tradition of hunting. And not really for anybody is it just about the hunt. It's about a whole bunch of other things. And we want to preserve that. Well, if we want to preserve that, then we need to be able to spend the requisite amount of time. We need to apply our skills, whether it's in finance, whether it's in business, all these other things. Something like Huntstock doesn't happen without a lot of business acumen. It doesn't happen without your background in event planning and you putting your thumb on the scale and saying, I'm going to do something that matters in this niche here in the Northeast, in this underserved community. And so when we think about how we preserve this, take your kids out, let's do all these things, don't go on unposted land and, potentially get a piece of land posted. There's all these but these things are lowest common denominator. How do we think about this differently? Are we creating content just because we want to get sponsored by a product so that we can get free hunts and just hunt some places that we wouldn't have gotten a hunt to before? Or is there a vision that goes beyond our own personal self-aggrandization that is driving how we're building businesses to make sure that we've got the type of capital, we've got the type of the people, we've got the type of clout to make sure we can preserve this going forward? And that's what I love about Huntstock, right? It's awesome. You get a bunch of like-minded people that hunt. You get to pick up tips and learn things. You get to meet people. But there's a vision that's greater than any one of us that is driving this thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's really, all of that. I was listening to your dad's sermon on Sunday at Huntstock. And one thing that he said that stuck with me was just sometimes when we're doing things that might feel like they're really special and you're building on something, and you mentioned something like Huntstock, you could think that it's you or your energy or your work that goes into it that is the reason for that, but it's God that gave you all of that energy, gave you that inspiration. He's doing that, and he's working through you for a reason to do that, and that stuck with me, and I've been thinking about that a lot. Because sometimes I do sit back and I think, man, I'm working really hard on this. And I just think about myself and how much I'm working and giving up to do it. But it really isn't. It's not me. That all came from somewhere. That inspiration came from somewhere. And there is a grander vision for it. And I think one of the things, too, that I don't think a lot of people understand about what it takes to bring Huntstock to life is risk. There's so much risk involved, and I just happen to have a less risk aversion than a lot of people, and I'm willing to risk a lot more.
You're a maverick, dude.
To just make it work. But bringing all these seminar speakers in and these content creators, and it costs a lot of money to put Huntstock on, and I just don't I think the reason why something like this hadn't been done before is just people are so scared of taking big risks. They're scared of it. Financial risks, the risks that it can bring to your family. You do lose when you're running a business and you're so passionate about it. There is a trade-off of if I was still working a 9-to-5 job, I'd have a lot more time at home. And I'm home every single, I try to get out of here by 5 and get home and be with the kids and the family the entire night. But there's 2 or 3 weeks leading into Huntstock where I'm working, I'm burning the midnight oil on that, you know what I mean? And just because I don't want it to ever fail. But there's a significant risk into it, and I think I've weathered the storm. I talked with you earlier this year when I was kind of in limbo with Huntstock. You know, I was at a place where it was like, and it really centered around that New York show. The New York show just wasn't, it was looking like it wasn't going to turn out to be what the Massachusetts show is. And I make a promise to everybody that when I'm going to put a Huntstock out there, it's going to be a special experience. It's going to be worth the $40 you're spending. It's going to be unlike any other show that you have gone to before. And New York was very clearly heading in a direction that wasn't going to be the case. And you know, that's a blow to an entrepreneur initially. It felt like a big blow. And then you had a lot of sponsors that were dealing with tariff stuff. And not only in the New York show was I losing, sponsorship interests like the Massachusetts show. If you were there this year, there weren't a ton of big brands. It was a lot of local exhibitors, but we did have Vortex and Onyx and Sig Sauer and Ruger, and we had some big brands there, but it wasn't at the level that I want it to be. So I was talking with you about it because you do business consulting and you've got a great mind and you're a good sounding board and all of that stuff. And I was like, look, I need to find another job. Like, I'm looking at other jobs, and just nobody else knows this except for us. But I was like, look, I'm looking at other jobs. I need to support my family, and Huntstock just isn't doing it right now. So here's my plan. I've got a couple of great prospects out there for new work, and what I want to do is find the right person to come in and run Huntstock and have the same energy level that I have and the dedication to it that I have. I need to try to find another me to keep Huntstock going as I'm getting back into the full-time workforce. And that was in my head, that was a huge challenge, and we were working through some of it and coming up with some plans to do that. And then, things change. I went to Wisconsin to interview Dan. This was about the time that, I was just looking at New York. It's like, there's no way New York's going to happen. I can't put the Huntstock name out there and then have a show that is underwhelming and that people feel like they were promised this and they got this. And while we were in Wisconsin, me and Pat Burns were already discussing canceling New York. And then, Dan kind of infused us with some more energy out there. And he's like, this seminar lineup you have in Massachusetts is incredible. Like, he was so excited about coming to the show, and just from the seminar lineup, he's like, if you brought this out to Wisconsin, it would be a huge success. You should think about that. And by the time we left and got back on the plane to come to Massachusetts, we were already thinking, dude, we're going to do one in Wisconsin. Like this, he's right. We need to go to Wisconsin. Right. And then things just started bubbling and rolling downhill. The Massachusetts, we hired some consultants to help us with the things that we're not good at. Like I don't know anything about ad placements and social media and paid ad buys and things like that. So we hired somebody that knew what they were doing to help us with that. And things just started going great. Ticket sales are going great for Massachusetts. We canceled New York, which was a big relief. Not only on our side from, we're not going to put out a subpar event, but also it freed up so many work cycles and allowed us to focus and hone in on Massachusetts and make sure that this show was incredible. And it was our best show ever, and partly because we canceled that New York event. We had more New Yorkers coming back over. We had that regional, only one event in a region, which I think is super important to do, and we're going to continue that. If we do expand past the Midwest, it's going to be regional. I don't think we're going to do a Wisconsin one and a Michigan one and a Pennsylvania. We're not. We're going to do Wisconsin. That goes good. We might open a southern show and then one in the west. I think 4 Huntstocks is it. But, yeah, I was at that point where I was very, skeptical about the future of Huntstock, because I think a lot of people might think, they come to the event, they look at it, there's 4,000 people, there's exhibitors everywhere. They think that, I'm making millions of dollars off of this. And, at the end of the day, for people who are seriously curious about it, it's probably $50,000 that I take home for all of that work.
all of that time, all the risk, all the other things that I'm kind of putting off and sacrificing for 50 grand. And I'm sure most people listening make more than that. So that I was at that point where it's like, and it's not about money, but in order to keep doing it and keep my family the way that it is and be the best dad and husband that I can be, all of that stuff, it just wasn't going to be sustainable that way. And I'm hoping that this Midwest event already has so much momentum, but that will be the event that finally gets me to a point where, all right, now it's worth it to keep going with this without having to sacrifice, find another person to do what I'm doing. Although that's important too. I mean, delegating and finding the right people and
delegate to elevate,
making hires. That's all going to be a big part of this.
Yeah. Well, when we talk about running good businesses, and this concept applies even to the hunt itself. Dan Sullivan's book, The Who Not How, right? There's only so much of us. God created us, each of us uniquely. And we're more effective leaning into what we're already good at and becoming great at it rather than trying to become competent at everything. And there's only so much Pat and Pat to go around. And Pat can't do Huntstock everywhere. Pat and Pat can't even do Massachusetts Huntstock on their own.
Right.
So then it's like, okay, how are we going to delegate to elevate? We need to be willing to take some financial risk or able to do that. But where can we be strategic on that? How can we... and when I say that applies to hunting too, I have to accept that I'm not going to be a combination of Dan Infalt and Rick Labby and Barry Wenzel, and I can never download all their brains and put it all in this brain and just know all this stuff. So some of it is what do I enjoy, what am I good at, what am I going to focus on becoming great at, right? Who am I going to keep in my circle as friends and hunting partners to be able to elevate me where I'm maybe not as good and will get good over time, but I don't have the capacity to focus on that right now.
Yep. You are a sum of your 5 best friends or the 5 people you spend the most time with.
And how am I going to be intentional and strategic with that? And how do I apply that to the hunting concept too? So for right now, I'm deer hunting. I love deer hunting. Bear bait season's coming up, and it's all gone into bear bait season. And then it's going to be ducks, and then it's going to be deer, and then it's going to be, right? But I'm not doing all this at once. Everything. I mean, when I go into work in one of my offices, my desktop picture is a picture of a bear that I got on camera last week. Like every single thing I'm doing, I'm wearing a Make Bear Hunting Great Again hat here. Everything is about getting that bear over bait. That's what I'm about right now. And once I do that, boom, I'm going to pivot, and it's probably waterfowl season. It'll be my first season with my versatile hunting dog that I have thanks to Huntstock.
Awesome, dude.
Huntstock is, Huntstock, I don't even think the impact that Huntstock has had. I mean, some of it, but on individual people and bringing people together, it's more than just a few fun days where you meet like-minded people. Friendships, relationships, business opportunities. We have our family dog because of Huntstock. There's so many great things that will pay dividends for years and years and years, well beyond, right now.
That's what I was most sad about, by the way, not to cut you off here, but I was most sad when I was thinking I need to hire somebody to do this and I'm going to get back into the full-time workforce. I was most sad about the possibility that could lead to all of this stuff that has nothing to do with money at Huntstock. It's about connections and the intangible things that would all kind of start falling off a cliff, and thank God that's not happening now.
Amen to that. And I think keeping it regional, that's really important. That Huntstock is special because it's regional. I could go to a Western hunting show with thousands and thousands of people with all the big brands. Most of it doesn't apply to me. Most of these people don't hunt the places I hunt. I don't know who half these people are. But out here where it's like, okay, this is my tribe. These guys go through the same nasty swamps I go through. These guys have figured out how to conquer this place that I hunt, and I haven't figured out how to conquer this. These guys live around where I live. These guys are out there when it's 11 degrees out, just like I am, right? These guys, it's a different thing, and I think that can be applied. There's riches and niches, right? When you're building a business, there's riches and niches, no matter what business you're in. So if this stays regional, then the attractant is the fact that it's regional, right? That's why it's special, and I think Huntstock has been special in so many people's lives because it's regional. So look forward, I'm looking forward to it next year. Hopefully next year I'm going to be coming in with like a buckhead and with a pretty sizable bear rug, right?
That would be awesome.
That's my goal to come in for next year. And hopefully my dad's coming in preaching next year with something.
Oh, he will be. He's going to get into hunting now, isn't he?
Yeah, so my dad is like 60 years old. He's never hunted his entire life. And, I've kind of danced around it the last few years. And then this year he's just like, hey, so what we should do this year? We should go hunting together. I was like,
so
really now?
Man. Yeah.
But that wouldn't happen without Huntstock too, I don't think.
Yeah.
I was hunting, but he got exposed to the hunting community. He saw how they wrapped their arms around him and welcomed him. His interest was piqued by some of the things he saw. So this year we're gonna be hunting.
That makes me so happy, man. That's awesome. Yeah, there's thousands of those stories. I do hear it a lot. People will send me messages on who they met, their new hunting buddy, or they started a business with somebody from meeting them at Huntstock, or they got married. There's people that went to the first Huntstock that met there that are now married and have kids from Huntstock.
Wow.
And there's so many incredible things like that that keeps me motivated, and I think it's one of the reasons that I'm less worried about risk. I'm more willing to risk more when I see the connections that people make there and what it actually has done for their lives. I worked at Spartan Race for many years, and one of the cool things about Spartan Race was it was transformational. That was an event that people they found a community. Maybe they never had a community before that they found, and they made friends there. Maybe they didn't have big friends groups, but they would go to Spartan Race. They'd never raced before. They would start racing. They would start running and then training into that, and then getting in. It's almost the same thing as what Huntstock is doing. And the reason I stayed at Spartan Race so long was because of the value that came out of that in the community and seeing it change people's lives. And I'm stoked that is happening with Huntstock too.
That's it, man. And that translates to the actual season. There's people I'm going to be hunting with this season that I wouldn't be hunting with without Huntstock. This season I've got a pretty full itinerary. September, like I said, is all about the bear bait. And there's this guy that I was introduced to, so I have a bait spot in New Hampshire that, again, the activity's there, so I'm going to be headed up there for a couple weeks and working during the day, hunting during the afternoons. And then I've got a deer hunt coming up with somebody that I met at Huntstock as well.
Cool.
Maybe you and I will get out together.
Oh,
and,
we will.
That'll be super fun.
Because I didn't know that you hadn't got a deer yet.
Yeah, no deer yet.
Yeah, I've been seeing you every year at Huntstock, and I can tell that you're so invested into the sport and the tradition. And I didn't know that you hadn't successfully harvested a deer yet. So I want to make sure. I want to take you out and have let's definitely do a couple hunts. Have you hunted Mass before?
I haven't hunted Mass.
Yeah,
it's been all New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine.
Yep. We got to get you a mass license, and I'll take you into some of my good spots. And last year I took Scotland into one of them, and he got $2 within 15 minutes.
No way.
with his muzzleloader, like there's some of the spots that I've honed in on. They're just really I've spent a lot of time and effort into it, and they're not guaranteed spots, especially with archery. But you're going to see deer, and you're going to see bucks, and you will have an opportunity. So let's make sure that happens.
We will make sure that happens this year, 2025.
Yep. Hold me to that.
I will.
All of you guys hold me to that, too.
That's right. Next year, you see me at Huntstock. Make sure that we got out. Hold us accountable.
Absolutely. What else you want to talk about?
So I wanted to ask you about this, right? So, deer hunting. You've obviously had a lot of success with the deer hunting. And this is kind of going back to an earlier conversation we had. But the whole scent thing. So I get the scent control thing. I've been hearing a lot about the difference between ground scent and air scent. And, I guess the new school of thought is it's more about the scent that you're leaving on the ground on the trail like when you're moving around, as opposed to the scent that's going downwind. I don't know how I feel about that. I know how it makes sense from a bear perspective. From a deer perspective, I'm not necessarily sure the application. So I have a separate pair of boots that is for bear hunting and versus deer hunting, because I literally slather it with all sorts of like scent stuff because I'm trying to leave a scent trail.
Yeah.
My deer boots, I'm not trying to leave a scent trail. So like totally different like sets of equipment. What's your thoughts about ground scent versus wind scent when it comes to deer specifically?
The only thing that I pay super attentive detail to is the ground scent walking into your stand. After you've hunted for enough years and you start to read the woods, like I said earlier, getting some of that stuff that's clogging your brain up out of there, that you just eventually have to say, you know what, I'm giving that up. I'm not gonna think about that too much. And for me, that was the scent control measures. You start to see the woods better, and your ingress to your stand is super important. I'll use Onyx first to kind of first I'll go out and scout, and I'll find scrapes and bedding areas and where there's feed. And as I'm out there, if I find a scrape, the first thing I'm doing when I see a big annual scrape is I'm looking up. I'm trying to find a tree that has a shooting lane into that scrape, and sometimes it's not there, and then I'll find a different scrape. But I'm always, as soon as I find a point of interest like that, and for me, annual scrapes are is the most important one, and then I'll get a camera on that, which will inventory all the deer. But I see that scrape, I look for some trees. All right, that one's only 20 yards away. This one's 18. That one's 30. All of those are fine. And then once I find a tree, you'll be able to see the game trail that's going in and out of that scrape, and see if you have a nice shot into that trail on a broadside deer. And it doesn't always add up that way. And then I'm looking at the wind, because a lot of the places I hunt, it's in the northwest, and it is in the northeast. Majority of the time a northwest prevailing wind. So you try to find a tree on the southeast side of that trail going into that scrape. And if you do that enough, you're going to find a bunch of those trees that are like, all right, boom, put an Onyx point there. Here is a scouted tree that can possibly produce. And then all your other scouting, your camera, having a camera on that scrape will tell you if it's being used a lot, and if there's a buck there you want to shoot, or whatever your goal may be. And then after all of that, I look in Onyx, and I start to try to plan a way to get into that tree, knowing where the bedding is, knowing where the food is, knowing if I'm coming in the morning, because I love to hunt mornings. A lot of bow hunters if you have less time, they'll prefer the evening. But if I'm coming in the morning, you're going to be walking through deer on their feet and they're feeding. You're going to be walking through food sources. So again, you look at your Onyx and you're like, all right, you got to avoid that area, got to avoid this area, got to avoid this area, because possibility that deer are going to be up feeding in there as you're going in the morning is really high. So you start to plan your routes that way, and you can see major trails. I like to use major trails to get in as far as I can before I go off trail and then get to my stand. So even sometimes, like, a major trail might be going like this and looping all the way around over here, and the tree I want is over here, where I could pop in over here, right? Let's just say this is north-south facing, right? And there's a stand right there, that a great spot on a scrape. If the wind's coming this way, northwest wind's going this way, I won't take the shorter way into that stand there, because now you're muddying all that. You're putting your ground scent there, and deer that are going to be coming into that are going to smell it. I'll sometimes go all the way around and then take the exact northwest trail into that stand. So you really have to plan that ingress, because that, if a deer crosses it, they're going to smell it. If you go all the way around, they're used to smelling you on major trails. They're used to smelling humans on major trails anyway. So you're not doing anything bad for your chances by walking on a major trail. Mm-hmm. So that is just like, that's free access. You're like, anytime I can walk on a major trail for the majority of it, you do that. And then this way, if I'm in this tree, my scent's already going to be blowing this way with the northwest wind, so I'm not doing any hurt by taking that southeast line to the northwest by walking in that way. I'm trying to walk in the same way that the wind is. So that's all I think about when it comes to ingress. Egress isn't as important. Most of the time I'll go out the same way. I might have an e-bike that I drive all the way over here and leave that there, and I'll walk out the same way. But your ingress into your stand, that's leaving the ground scent, and that's what's going to end up blowing up your hunt if a deer crosses it.
Now, you mentioned something. So Onyx, the wind feature, has been so helpful to me, because I can mark certain spots and I can see what direction the wind is blowing in that spot so that I know before I even choose what spot to go to from my house, okay, the wind's good for the spot, it's not good for the spot. I mean, it's mostly accurate. So the wind planning is super important. One thing that I fumbled the bag on starting as a new hunter, and I'm curious how you manage this, is all these different spots. There's different strategies that you have on how you get in, where you put your stand, right? You're marking scrapes, you're marking rub lines, from this year to the next year, whatever. There are certain spots that I hunt on my Onyx where I can't find anything I need because it is full of pins. And it might be like literally a scrape from 2021 that's not there anymore. And I never deleted it. And it's just, it becomes, but if I sit down and I got to go through all these pins one by one and decide what's still relevant, and then I don't want to let it go because it's like, that was a scrape from 2022, but maybe it's still there. I don't know. I haven't gone and looked. I don't want to delete that pin. Maybe that could be helpful. How do you manage your Onyx pins so that in real time you can find the information you're looking for and make real-time decisions?
This episode is brought to you by OnX, the #1 hunting GPS app. The OnX Hunt app has been an invaluable tool in my hunting pursuits, whether I'm hunting, shed hunting, scouting, or e-scouting. To support our show and gain access to the best hunting app out there, use code HS20 when signing up, and you'll get 20% off your plan. I use OnX to mark rub lines, annual scrapes, stand locations, camera locations, and a lot of other points of interest. For shed hunting, I use the tracking feature, which shows me where I have walked in a patch of woods, but more importantly, it shows me where I haven't been, these little pockets of woods I may have skipped over, and that really helps me to find matched sheds that I'm in pursuit of. In Massachusetts, we have to be 500 feet away from a dwelling to release an arrow, or a bullet for that matter, so I frequently will use the bubble feature, which you place a waypoint down on a building, and then you can set your radius bubble to whatever your state setback is, and that'll show you where you where is off limits to hunt and where you are safe to hunt. There are tons of other features I use daily to help me be more successful, which I'll break down in a later video on my channel. But if you want to give OnX a try, they're a great sponsor. I would recommend supporting them. Go download OnX from the App Store and use code HS20 for 20% off.
There are certain spots that I hunt on my Onyx where I can't find anything I need because it is full of pins. And it might be like literally a scrape from 2021 that's not there anymore. And I never deleted it. And it's just, it becomes, but if I sit down and I got to go through all these pins one by one and decide what's still relevant, and then I don't want to let it go because it's like, that was a scrape from 2022, but maybe it's still there. I don't know. I haven't gone and looked. I don't want to delete that pin. Maybe that could be helpful. How do you manage your Onyx pins so that in real time you can find the information you're looking for and make real-time decisions?
A couple ways. I color code things, so I use blue just personally. Anybody can use whatever color they want, but I use blue if it's like an active camera. I'll have it blue. If it's an annual scrape that's active every single year, I'll have that be blue. When I first started getting into scouting, when I first used OnX, but when I was getting heavy into using OnX, I would mark every single scrape I came across. I would mark something that looked like a scrape that I wasn't sure if it was a scrape. I'd mark every rub, little rubs, everything. I don't do that anymore. I only mark the annual scrapes, the big scrapes that you can see the roots and the rocks and stuff under because they've been scraping away that earth for so many years. You can see that. It's got a great strong licking branch, and it's just a place that every year is going to be active. Those are the ones I mark now. I'm sure there's still some in there from like 2019 that, from my real early days using OnX that I need to get in there and delete, but it can get overwhelming if you're marking everything. So I would say learn how to identify them as being an annual scrape, or a community scrape's another word for it, and only mark those ones. Mark the big obvious ones that are going to be used every year by every buck in the area, because there are some that'll just be on a path from it's a terrain feature and they happen to funnel through there every once in a while, but it'll be a fainter scrape, it'll be smaller, and one buck might do that once in the year, and that might be it. But you also gotta learn those by putting cameras on them, because some of them might be harder to identify as being just a passing through scrape, or for people who are new to it, it can be harder to identify and see that. But you're only going to learn that by putting cameras on and getting the inventory and seeing how much traffic is being used there. I also I will, like you said, I'll edit the name of every waypoint that I have. But if it's something that I'm interested in, I'm going to be using the next season, I change it to blue. And if I move a camera, camera inventory is a big thing, and you need to know, like, I have tons of camera pins that were productive cameras in other years, but I just change it to white when I take the camera off of there. It's a place I might want to go bring a camera back to in the future, so I leave the pin, but I change it to white. And all my active stuff that I'm going to be focusing on the next year is in blue.
Makes sense. Yeah, I instituted a similar type of system maybe like last year, but that's after, 5 years of just my map being full of red pins. So half of me says, let's just get rid of all this stuff.
Do you use the breadcrumb feature at all? Like tracking your like the tracking feature?
Yep, I use the tracking feature, and then I try to take the pins and actually categorize them so that I can see visually. It's not just an X, but I can see, okay, this is like a turn off on the trail, this was a scrape, this is whatever. So slowly but surely, like turning an aircraft carrier, my data is starting to become better. But I definitely need to, before the season starts, get through and delete a lot of stuff, that spend the time that's just not super helpful or relevant anymore. Because I find a lot of things where it's like, okay, I thought this was a water source when I first started hunting, but this is not actually a vernal pool. This was just, it rained and there was water there, and there's no consistent water here. This is not is not useful. Or this, I thought this was a scrape, but this was really a turkey scratch, right? Like, I need to get rid of this, or whatever the case was. So there, probably 60% of my content's bad and about 40% of it's good, instead of being like 80-20 like it was a few years ago. But, when you've got limited time to hunt and you do your preseason scouting or whatever, it's so important that your information is actionable and you can find what you need very quickly. So for all you hunters out there that are starting with Onyx, or you're starting to, drop pins, it's better to be more discriminatory than less, because you can always add more pins. But once you end up with 1,200 pins, it's hard to take them out.
It can be a lot to manage.
It can be a lot to manage and find what you're looking for.
Yeah, one of the things I use just a tip to use the tracking feature is, like when I was saying earlier, like imagine this line is that main trail coming. This particular one I'm thinking about is about 1.5 miles to get over here. So I can walk it in 45 minutes, and it's not bad. But when I use my e-bike, it cuts that down significantly, which is awesome. And I had a tree up in here, but this loops around this way. This trail goes this way. And once I found that scrape that I knew would be a productive scrape, and I found the tree 20 yards on the southeast side of that, I was like, all right, this is looking in to be a good spot. And then my next step, like I said, was to figure out my ingress, which was going this way to hit this trail as it looped back around down here. I start from my tree, I turn on the tracking feature, and I use the daylight there to find the easiest path where I'm not going to be making a lot of noise, and I'm not going to be going through anything where the deer are going to be no feeding. And I track it from the stand to my spot down there, and then I end it there. So I know where. It just helps you in the morning, in the dark. Like, you get in there and you have your trail all mapped out to get right to your stand. So I do that every time when I plan an ingress. And then another thing I'll do is then I'll go back up to that scrape, and you can see the trail coming in and out. And I'll try to go where it crossed this main path over here. Start there, and then start the tracker again, and I'll walk the deer path. I'll walk the deer trail for as far as it goes, and that'll lead me to a bunch of other stuff too. Another nice scrape over here. Oh wow, there's some nice acorns here. Here's some bedding. But you try to stay on that deer path and track those, and I like to do that a lot when I'm shed hunting too. If I get into a spot and there's a really nice game trail, I'll get on it and I'll use that tracking feature, because then once you have enough of those, and I'll change those to a different color. So that's not my egress trail. If I want to look like, oh, maybe my game trails are red or they're green or something, I can, once you have enough intel loaded into there, you can look at it from the aerial point and you can start to see, wow, these trails are running parallel here. There's nice 3 or 4 major trails, across here, and it can just help you out with planning, your stand locations and what you're going to do in the future.
Planning. That's it. There's all sorts of tools that we can use. Onyx is the one I use probably the most often out of all the tools. that I have, whether it's software or, it's probably the most important thing I have. But yeah, man, this is going to be a great season.
I'm super excited for you and your dad to get out and hunt.
I have property that there's like one good stand spot on it, and I missed a buck last year, maybe the year before. See, I've tried to delete it from my memory. I'm like a baseball closer, I can't even think about it. I got deleted from my brain. But this buck was coming probably every other day at around 6 o'clock at night during bow season. And this spot is like 250 yards out of my back door. So I had the Onyx pin. I had the wind pattern, so I would only go on days where the wind was good, because there's really only one way to get in there. And the wind was perfect. I got in there, and there were so many times I went in there when the wind wasn't right, and I was like busting deer, and I was like, I need to do a better job at this. And so I go in there, get in the stand. 20 minutes later, here he comes. Probably like 6, 7 point. Would have been nice for my first deer. He was a
absolutely
decent sized buck, and literally came to the exact spot broadside that I needed him. And I'd been working with the bow, and I'd been shooting targets. My deck is 12 feet off the ground, and the stand's 12 feet into the tree. So I was practicing shooting from the exact same height that I was going to be at in the stand. And I was ready, and I didn't get the buck fever. I didn't have the trembling hands. I didn't have the jerky fingers. I went through my process. I drew on him, held it for like 2 minutes, let down, drew again, right? So it was probably maybe 5-6 minutes where I could have taken a shot, but I didn't take a shot because I remembered listening to Dan Infalt and listening to all these people about, go through your process and, focus and all these things. And this is funny. So by the time I shot, like I could see him, but it was getting a little darker, and I don't have like a reflective thing on my arrows or whatever. So I shoot, and I couldn't really tell if I hit him or not, because it kind of looked like he kicked like I would have hit him, but he ran off into the, making a whole lot of racket. So at that point I was like, all right, don't get out of the stand right away. Sit, let it cool down if you got him. But I was like, I didn't really feel like I got him, but I couldn't really tell if I got him. I'm looking, I literally have binoculars in my stand to look 25 yards in front of me to see if I can find an arrow buried anywhere. I don't see the arrow.
Yeah.
I don't see any blood, but I don't see the arrow. So, anyway, long story short, what ended up happening was, he was at like 27 yards. I'd been shooting at 25 yards, and he jumped the string. I didn't account for the buckle. So his head was down, and he was eating, and so he buckled real quick, and the arrow just sailed right over his back. But it was a good learning experience, because I got him right when I thought that he would be there, but I had to start using the wind, right? Okay, this is the only way I can get in the stand. I'm going to hunt somewhere else today. The wind's not right, and every single day when the wind wasn't right, I didn't see deer. But
yeah, that's the main thing.
He showed up, the wind was right, and I got right in there, and it was awesome. And as far as I know, if my cameras aren't lying to me, that buck is still alive. So that's the stand my dad's going to be hunting out of this year.
Nice.
So maybe my dad will get that buck.
Yeah, and you've got a little history too. Having history with the deer is awesome. It adds to the experience for sure. And I'll say, like, depending on the size of the property that you hunt, there's a lot of places that I hunt where I can only go in on one specific wind, because they're small enough. There's one, good tree to hunt out of or something, or you're hunting over one, feature that you want. For me, I like, again, community scrapes, where I can only go in on northwest wind, or I can only go in on a south wind. But if you have a if you have a couple 100 acres or 1,000 acres or something, you want to go in there and do that same process that I was telling you about. Find the scrape, find a tree with the right wind, and then plan an ingress and egress. And you want to do that with every wind. If you have a big enough property, find one that's good for a south wind or a southwest wind, or find one that's an east, good for an east wind, and do all of that stuff before you get into the season, and just be prepared for it. Especially if it's a productive spot and there's a bunch of deer in there that you really want, or, if you just want to meat hunt, whatever your, prerogative is, having a stand location for every wind, at least one in your spots is preferable. But like I said, there's a lot of places where you can't. It's just you can only go in there on the right wind, and you just have to know that and catalog it in your mind. You look at the forecast tomorrow. Oh, it's a weird east wind. All right, I know I've got 2 or 3 nice easterly wind spots that I don't get to hunt very often. And normally you're really excited to go there because you don't get to hunt it very often. But those can be really good days, when you have that random weird wind, because it's your first time going in there in the season, or you might only hunt it once or twice in a year. But you've done your scouting before, and you have it all set up and you're prepared for it.
Preparation. Clay Newcomb, now with Meat Eater Forward, he founded Bear Hunting Magazine and everything, and he said something that really impacted me. He was talking about time versus good time. He's like, the older I get, 2 really, really good days out there is better than, at the right time, is better than 10 days at the wrong time.
Oh, yeah.
And so when it comes to your, preseason scouting, having spots for every wind, having spots, for changing food sources, right? Like maybe this is a good spot for archery season, but, acorns aren't dropping anymore, or the food source changes, or whatever the case is, the water freezes halfway through November, right? Mapping all of that out, and that's so important to make sure that for the time we have, we can still be hunting. Because if I've only got 2 spots, and if the wind isn't good on either of them, I've got nowhere to hunt. I'm just walking as some WMA, walking down a trail, hoping I jump something. That's not that fun.
Yeah.
But when you've done the homework, you've done the preparation, you've stacked the intel, you have a group of friends that you can share intel with maybe, and you can accelerate each other's efforts, right? You can amass a lot of spots together. That's when it gets that's when it gets fun. So I'm going to be doing this till my legs fall off, man.
Yeah.
And it's only going to get better.
Yeah.
And the longer you go, the more spots you have, the more intel you have, and be patient. That's what I'm trying to practice. I used to feel really, I'm in all this hunting stuff and I hunt with all these people, and it used to be an ego thing that I didn't have like a deer on the wall and everybody else did, and I let that go, man.
Yeah,
like this is the long game. This is. And when I get it, it's going to be awesome. Hopefully it's this year. And if it's not this year, I'm going to be back doing it just as hard next year.
And you have to make mistakes, and you just have to learn from. The only way you're going to get better knowledge and be more knowledgeable about it is making mistakes. And when you're just starting out, you might only have 1 or 2 spots that you feel confident in your first year. Next year, you should have 2 or 4, and it should multiply. Like Dan Infalt now has like 70 go-to spots, within an hour of his house. And he says, I hunt most of them 1 or 2 days a season. The most I'll spend in like one stand, maybe I'll be there 6 days or something. But you constantly have to be bouncing around, keeping it fresh. And the only way to do that is to put years under your belt, because that knowledge just compounds. And then once it clicks, because there will be a time where you walk in the woods and you're just like, wow, now it's clicking. Now I'm seeing all of these things and moving the puzzle pieces around on the chessboard or whatever, moving the chess pieces on the chessboard. Like it'll get to that point, and once that happens, then it gets even more fun than what you're having right now. But don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to miss deer. Don't be afraid. You're gonna wound some deer and never recover them. All that stuff's gonna happen, but it's all part of the journey, and the only way you can do it is putting more time in.
That's right. Right after I missed that buck, before I realized that I had missed him because I wasn't out of the stand, I called my hunting buddy. Well, I pulled my phone out of my pocket to give him a call to say, hey, I may have gotten one, because we had this thing, hey, if you get one, come on down, we'll help you drag and whatever. And as I'm pulling the phone out of my pocket, it was already ringing, and it was him. And I was like, what are the chances? So I pick up the phone, and I'm like, dude, I don't know, but I think I may have just gotten one. And then I was waiting for his response, and then I realized he was already talking. And he's like, dude, I just shot one.
How awesome is that, man?
He didn't even hear that I thought that I may have gotten one. And he's like, are you able to come over? So that night that I missed that deer, I was at my buddy's house until midnight helping him break down his deer. And, in past years, that may have been a little bit of like salt in the wound, but honestly, I was fine. It was awesome.
That's
the
best part about it.
I was thrilled that he got a deer.
Oh, yeah.
We're able to partake in the harvest together. I was able, it was great. So, it's, we got to keep this fun. We have to have the right perspective. And like I said, I'm going to be doing this till my legs fall off. I mean, my son, I got him one of those kid training 22s, so he's 7 now. And hopefully next year, maybe 1 or 2 days, he's sitting in a blind or something. And, you know, if he gets good enough at using the gun, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it just takes practice. I mean, I started hunting in Vermont when I took my hunter safety course at 6, and I think the first time I went out with my dad, I was 7, and, you know, go to deer camp the opening weekend. That didn't start until I was 11, and when I was 11, I got my first deer. In Massachusetts, you have to be 16 to youth hunt, you know, so it's like there's a long wait down here, but having those other states, you know, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, it's cool. Get them out there as early as you can, you know, even if it's, don't even put a bullet in the gun if he doesn't know how to use it yet, you know, but just get him out into the blind.
Get him out into the blind.
But practice with him, get him comfortable with it. I mean, a kid can get really good at shooting a gun safely young if you do it the right way. But yeah, there was a great film in the Huntstock Film Festival this year called Legacy in the Leaves. I don't know if you're able to see that yet. Northeast Traditions put it out. They just uploaded it publicly on their YouTube page a few days ago. But I think he's 7 years old, Justin Cook's son, and it was centered around him, and he got a nice spike horn or a 4-pointer. I forget what it was, but you know, it can be done at such a young age, and it can really, you know, be an awesome experience for a dad, and then make that be a part of the kid's life forever, because you won't forget it when you get your deer. If you get a deer at 7 or 8 years old, I mean, it's insane.
Not gonna forget it. I brought all my kids to Huntstock this year, all 5 of them. My oldest, who's a boy, and then my second oldest, my daughter. They're like all into it. My daughter, both of them. They've gutted plenty of squirrels with me. You know, like they're used to. They can't wait to get their own. So they'll be coming to Huntstock for a long time, Pat.
Oh, awesome, dude. Well, hey, I've really enjoyed our friendship. It's been an awesome conversation, and yeah, keep in touch with me the whole season. Don't be afraid to message me, call me, whatever. We're gonna try to get you a deer this year, and I hope you get a bear too.
I love it. I can't wait, man.
Awesome, dude. Thanks a lot for coming, buddy.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.